Gris was a game I knew I would like from the moment I discovered it. Beautiful watercolor visuals, no dialogue, and an emotionally intimate story were promised from the clips I saw, probably from some top 10 list on YouTube. Needless to say, I was not disappointed in the slightest. This very special game has a certain multifaceted beauty that runs rampant throughout its succinct timeline. The artwork is simply incredible. I'll usually stop to take a screenshot or two when I come across a particularly beautiful moment in a game, but during my time with Gris, I took over 130. Just look at some of these compositions, every frame is literally a painting. But Gris's beauty goes beyond just its visuals. Its richly written story carries even more emotional weight. To sum up very broadly, Gris is a game about grief. It's a place of healing for the main character, who is also named Gris, as she attempts to process the traumatic event that recently took place in her life. The game is divided into more or less 5 sections, each representing one phase of grief outlined by the Kubler-Ross model: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The space we will be analyzing, which I am calling the Sky Temple, is in the acceptance portion of the game, right before the game's conclusion. Everything the character Gris has gone through up to this point has led her to this wonderful location, where she finally prepares herself to take the final step on her journey of healing. With all this in mind, let's discuss why I consider Gris's Sky Temple to be a very special and important sacred space. The section begins with a perhaps unexpected atmosphere, with no music except for an ambient humming to go along with Gris's light footsteps. The enchanting cyan glass introduced shortly before goes from an accent to the subject, now making up every surface you can interact with. The swashes of painting-like colors surround parts of the environment like a veil. But the most surprising thing is how much of the screen is encompassed by nothing but clouds and sky, creating a cosmic and suspensefully curious feeling, like investigating a corner of the woods you never bothered to explore before, under the entrancing cover of a crystal clear night. One thing I love about this beginning section is the very intentional choice to hold off on the score. The music does a lot to establish themes throughout the section, as we will see, but for now, its absence creates a feeling unfelt anywhere else in the game. In this beginning section, we are also introduced to the mechanic of revealing platforms by exposing areas to light. Gris borrows several mechanics from other games, and while it doesn't try to hide its influence, it always stylizes them, causing them to feel like a natural part of the world of this game. Instead of a bulbberry being eaten by Yoshi, Gris has fluttering hummingbirds holding bioluminescent orbs, acting as a sort of guide for our protagonist. On top of being visually stunning, there's also a thematic connection to this mechanic. In each of the game's 5 sections, a color is added to symbolize Gris's progression through that phase of grief. Her journey into acceptance is characterized by the color yellow, which is often used to depict light. Yellow seldom dominates the screen, however. It's instead used sporadically as an accent, illuminating Gris's way, revealing platforms previously unseen. When we grieve, our perspective is often influenced by intense, painful emotions, which can cause us to miss details others might find obvious. This is, of course, normal, and nothing to be ashamed of, as grieving affects everyone differently. But when we begin to reach a place of acceptance with whatever happened, we can start to see things clearly again. Just as the various yellow lights in the stage reveal entire structures right before Gris's very eyes. But here they are but bursts of light. Beautiful and helpful, but for now, finite. She is beginning to reach a point of acceptance, but still has just a little longer to go. Let's continue. As we go up, we get to know the location more and further experience its aesthetic splendor. The cyan glass we walk on is crafted into divine structures reaching up into the heavens, some even fading away as they rise. The environment is dotted with urns, plants, and lights, each lush with their own vibrant greens, reds, purples, and of course, yellows. Gentle waterfalls cascade down from the square aquified trees introduced in the previous chapter. I love how these trees have been stylized to fit the temple's look. Instead of the red wooden stems seen in the forest, the trunk is now a cosmic indigo to white gradient, characteristic of the starry expanse behind. While the rest of the game is undoubtedly beautiful, the artwork had to stop itself from using certain colors for the thematic reasons we touched on before. But now that every color has been unlocked, the environment has no limitations in the way of a pastel explosion. And this is the result. I sometimes get teary-eyed just observing. And just when you think this place can't get any more beautiful, the music starts to play. The title of this perfectly soothing track is Firmament. Firmament is defined as a tangible manifestation of the heavens or sky. Knowing this, we can now better understand the significance of this location. This place isn't just heavenly, it is heaven. This idea will become important in regard to a theme we will explore later in the video, but for now, we can simply take it all in. In that moment, I just stopped, gazing and listening to the holy setting being created before my very eyes and ears. In that moment, I had never felt more tranquil and at peace. We finally arrived to the main area, where all the beauty mentioned before is even more concentrated. The luminous full moon sits shining in the background, warming the environment with its radiance. Multiple paths are now accessible for the first time, allowing us to take in the temple at our own pace. Long underwater aquarium-like passages are interspersed among the glassy structures, verdant with their own nautical life. Small birds perch on areas you can walk through, fluttering and chirping away as you get close. You see paths and even some stars you can't yet access, implying there's another layer to the temple you don't yet know about. And after exploring 2 of the temple's possible paths, that area becomes quite clear. Throughout the game, you are able to attempt to sing, but all Gris can muster is a weak whimper. But halfway through this chapter, her ability, heard before only in the game's intro, finally returns. Her sound is so breathtakingly beautiful that it literally causes the environment around her to blossom, allowing you to bring a life to the temple you didn't even realize was missing, as characterized by the previously absent color, pink. The temple was divine before, but now you're able to make it your own personal heaven. One thing I adore about Gris's singing is that it's actually not a very professionally refined tone. 10 years of choir have taught me that traditionally long, deep, and open tones are to be desired. Think opera singing. It sounds, for lack of a better word, choral. But Gris doesn't sing like that. Instead, her tone is wide and free, raw, unrestrained, and blooming with emotion, even bordering on a yell at certain notes. It's a cry into the yonder, a wholly sincere and unadulterated expression of her love, pain, and grief, all rolled into one. And just as the plants around her open up when encapsulated within her circle of influence, I too found myself opening up with tears, time and time again as I continued to use her new ability, awestruck with the variety of ways you can cause the temple to flourish. Regaining her voice was something very special and wholly symbolic, but it's by no means the only symbol coming from the temple. Beyond simply acceptance, there's a powerful message interwoven within the sights and moments from this hallowed location. Despite all the vibrant colors and serene environments, one of the subjects of this stage is actually just a line, perfectly straight and infinite, dividing the stage into two parts. And when you cross it, something a bit surprising happens. It can be so easy to just write this off as another borrowed platforming mechanic, but there's so much more to it than just a simple gameplay gimmick. Let's come back to the music. For the majority of the stage, the track Firmament is a slow, peaceful, and content lullaby, creating a sort of terminal feeling. It sounds like something that could be played to a person on their deathbed, satisfied and fulfilled with the life they lived and ready to move on to whatever comes next. But when you cross the line into the upside down portion of the stage, the music changes. A syncopated waltz has been added to the previously zen music, never fully lining up for longer than a moment to the rest of the song, which is in the normal 4/4 time signature by contrast. It's bouncy, curious, playful, something that could be played to a newborn infant learning to walk for the first time, eyes wide at the expansive world around them. My interpretation of this detail, along with other pieces presented to us, is a theme of rebirth through acceptance. The bottom parts of the temple, anything below the divine line, represent Gris's old life. We've already established the temple as a firmament, a tangible example of heaven. Keeping this in mind, Gris leaves the game's hub to go up, ascending into the heavens, leaving her old life behind to what lies ahead, with the entire rest of the game and rest of her life below her. In contrast, across the divine line awaits Gris's new life, a life of clarity, serenity, and acceptance. She receives a taste of what this life will be like, shown by the upside-down sections, but still has to travel through the temple collecting the stars, which I believe signifies her progression through grief at a more detailed level. She bounces back and forth between who she was and who she will be, represented by the platforming sections where we have to switch gravity multiple times. This also symbolizes how looking back on the experiences we had during our grief and comparing them to experiences afterward can help us better understand what happened and better understand ourselves. And finally, after progressing through all 5 chapters of grief, we are presented with what is, in my opinion, the most powerfully symbolic moment in the game. Having explored everything the temple has to offer, Gris climbs to the center of the divine line, where circles not unlike the one she creates while singing await her. Before, she was only given snapshots of what her new life would be across the divine line, but now, she's ready to embrace it. As she sings with all her heart, she rises, delicately settling into the center as her circle becomes one with the pattern, triggering it like a lock and key. As pink light encircles her like a celestial halo and smaller circles orbit her like planets to a star, her world literally turns upside down, or better yet, right side up again. She is finally ready to make her new life on the other side of the divine line her new normal. Reborn, she releases, transformed by her introspective journey, leaving her old life and pain above her, at a distance for the first time. And as she drops, the moon's yellow light of acceptance dominates the frame for the first time, signifying the well-earned inner peace now residing in her mind. Gris's Sky Temple touchingly wraps up a very special journey in one of the most beautiful sequences of artistry I've ever seen. Now, we can analyze every nook and cranny to flesh out each piece of symbolism interwoven within, justifying its beauty more and more, but in the end, distinguishing a place like this as sacred ultimately comes down to a feeling more than anything else. I think part of why this section resonated with me so much is because despite being about Gris, it still felt made for me. Because the game is presented in such a vague way, there's a lot of room for different interpretations. The game can be about Gris and her story, but it can also be about you and your story. It's clear what the writers intended, but you would be remiss not to insert your own stories and even trauma into your own personal experience when playing the game. When I first played Gris, I was fortunate enough to not have experienced any intense grief in my life so far, so I focused on Gris's story. Things are different now. And in my eyes, the game transformed from an emotional yet distant tale of a little girl losing her mother to something so much more. A place of healing, a haven for demonstrative vulnerability, a special little escape for me to come back to whenever I find myself at my lowest. Truly sacred, indeed. Thanks for watching.